Right. We've covered the Season 3 identities of Gregor and Rodion. Let's cover Emil Sinclair and Yisang. There's at least one interesting one in this. Next we have Sunk Association South Section 4 Director Emil Sinclair. In the training hall of Sunk Association South Section 4, it was bustling with noise. They were training while wielding their training swords, likely the kinds that aren't lethal. Well, the training swords were clashing against one another. The association members were making with the busy footwork, scraping against the wooden floor. During the third engagement between Sinclair and a brave subordinate, even though they had a timid voice, it was being buried in the noise. Sinclair advised going on the offensive first. He drew his sword somewhat hesitantly. He might seem meek and nervous, one who is talentless in the art of dueling, by how he carried himself. But he appeared to have a reputation, considering that his opponent was extremely tense, as though his opponent was overwhelming. Sinclair said that on the third engagement, it's important to parry and redirect the opponent's straightforward momentum to the side. His training partner understood. Sinclair was teaching swordplay to an association member, which was, a confusing sight, considering his trembling and nervous voice. And this was the director of Section 4 of the Sunk Association in the South. Then Sinclair instructed what to do with a particular attack. Then Sinclair's blade moved faster than the speed of thought, piercing through the defenses and narrowly missing the opponent's jaw. Sinclair apologized as he was trying to show them how to smoothly connect a parry into an attack. They were okay and realized that the director's reputation was not an exaggeration. Sinclair was modest about this, as it was moving like the blade guided him. It meant that he didn't have control over his blade, while those witnessing this were impressed. Sinclair was dejected, like he was in a world of his own, where it's just him and the blade, the manifestation of an extremely intense level of focus, like the flow state, or to be like water. Yes, a state that Bruce Lee once achieved, with his techniques perfected in that focused state. He rose through the ranks to become the director of Sunk Association South Section 4, but he didn't feel like he deserved this. That what happened, it wasn't due to his own achievements. Not purely due to his skill with the blade. The position he had felt like a burden, and that he was undeserving of such responsibility. It appears that someone else thought so as well, as a gauntlet flew out of nowhere and struck him during the training session. This meant that he was being challenged to a duel. Yes, it wasn't limited to their clients. It could be done by other sunk fixers as well. A cold association member apologized and told him that someone put out a dual contract against him. So, Sinclair understood. The Sunk Association duels in the client's stead, hired as a champion in a duel against the individual of the client's choosing, to be carried out as the contract stipulated. Contracts against other Sunk Association members happen more often than one might think. The Sunk Association made many enemies, despite, as a certain organized criminal put it, it's nothing personal. It was just business. Sinclair clearly made a lot of enemies as he received quite a lot of contracts due to his timid disposition. He asked about the rules. That cold association member apparently tried to talk them out of it, but their client had it out for him, who requested a level 3 duel, trial by combat, a duel to the death. Sinclair accepted. He sighed, and this encouraged his opponent, who grinned. Sadly for them, that sigh wasn't due to fear. Sinclair asked if his opponent was new to Section 4. They confirmed this. Sinclair asked if they didn't hear what happened last time. Clearly, that sigh was due to predictability, like this was getting tiresome. The others that witnessed this were making their pity towards Sinclair's opponent clear, but Sinclair would not withdraw a thrown gauntlet. That would be a shame. He then asked, "Is you prêt?" or "ready?" His opponent then said, "Allez!" The room had an atmosphere which was reflected by the attitude of those present that everything was seriously wrong. Even the opponent could tell that, but by the time they realized that, it was too late. The grand plan of taking the massive sum of the contract fee, the plan of taking over the tragically vacated office of Director Sinclair, who told them to focus on the tip of the blade. Yes, the plans of his opponent were scattered to nothingness as his blade swiftly and brutally penetrated his skull. Clearly, the divergence point here was, instead of being found by Limbus Company, he somehow survived, and then, when he was 20, if he wasn't already, he became a fixer of Sunk Association. Well, he got there eventually, and compared to Zwei Sinclair, he did better. Perhaps he does better in single combat than in defending against more than one target. As in the Zwei Association world, he was in Section 6, while in this reality, he was the director of Section 4. As for his strongly, reflexive combat style, where he reacts without conscious thought and can surprise his opponents, based on his timid personality, this isn't the only variant that does this. Blade lineage Salsu Sinclair has a similar combat style. While Sinclair inspired caution from most of his subordinates, Blade lineage Sinclair inspired respect from the others. Likely because with the Sunk Association, the violence was restricted to single combat rather than the use of excessive violence. Clearly, Sunk Sinclair is better able to deal with that, as Blade lineage Sinclair didn't like that, but it didn't prevent him from slaughtering his enemies when he needed to. There's also a number of things that have been revealed in this world. It shows that requirements for being a Sunk Association fixer includes how to wield a rapier and also speaking the French language. Well, in that case, sautant le pain et le fromage. Or, let's break out the bread and cheese. There was also the fact that there are different kinds of duels. In this case, it demonstrated a level 3 duel, trial by combat, a duel to the death. A level 2 duel is likely a non-lethal duel which involves potential blood being spilled, but they need to stay alive. A level 1 duel is likely a duel involving a ring out as a condition for it being concluded. It also, It also shows that standard procedure with challenging another to a duel is to throw the gauntlet at the subjects that the duel is challenged, which can even be done between other sunk association members, which in this case involved one that challenged Sinclair, intending to kill him. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was a common means of advancing in rank in this association. Although treachery isn't just there. Within the Shi Association during Library of Verona, this also has happened. Section 2 and 3 were sent on a variety of assassination contracts without adequate rest or treatment due to the corrupt director of South Section 1, Thelma, which devastated both of those sections, weakening Yujin, the director of Section 2, which was just as well as if she was at full strength. The library would have been toast. The main difference between the two is that while Director Thelma abused his power to get all of those that looked into his corruption to be wiped out in the line of duty, which ended up going nowhere as he was betrayed by Argalia, the Blue Sicko, by being fed to the Smiling Faces Syndicate that ate him alive. Well, if they didn't eat him, the sweepers would have. Within the Sunk Association, they're more direct and honest. Right, let's move on to Pequod First Mate Yisang. Yisang instructed the more uninitiated members of the crew on an approach that was more efficient. Well, more convenient anyway, pointing that out with a gentle smile on his face. They understood, specifically pointing at a plank of wood that was previously used to tie the sails to the mast that was being used as a practice target. It was already riddled with hundreds of marks from various weapons, the deepest being the most recent, made by Yisang, which he instructed to the others that they mustn't hurl their weapons with their weight behind it. However, he wielded his spear and adjusted his stance once again. It was long and narrow, keenly whetted, perfect for swinging and stabbing. Once the weapon has punctured the flesh, also the center of gravity, that maneuver shall be followed by... One of them was confused, seeing it as looking too advanced for them. Another flabbergasted, asking what kind of explanation was that, comparing it to an art class where he was asking them to draw a whole owl from 2 circles. Yisang asked if that was so. He was asking himself if his instructions were getting through to them. He was hoping that he could train them to be stronger with those training exercises, so that more of them would survive when facing the waves, which would come whether they wanted them to or not. It was no easy task, even with that. Facing the waves, challenging the whales, always resulted in inevitable losses. The lucky ones died, and it got it over with, either by the mermaids or by being swept to the sea by the waves. Those that didn't, those wounded by the whales, they'd watched their bodies and minds be overwritten by that of the mermaids, where they would become one of them. The captain ordered the skiff to be lowered, something that she often did. Yisang knew exactly why, as none were allowed to die, not without the captain's explicit orders. There had to be some other explanation for their disappearances. That was what the skiff was for. Yisang used to protest against those orders. He told her that we could have at least tried to save them. Why did the ship have to sail directly into the waves? Why now? But he knew. The first mate still answers directly to the captain, and the captain shall not be defied, no matter how psychotic and deranged they were. It's why Yi Sang let the others play their pranks on him, why he spent so much time trying to teach the new sailors how to fight with those training sessions. But watching them disappear one by one from the ship made him realize something. That in the end, nothing he did mattered. He then spoke. Once the voyage is over, only one wish remained in order to move the voyage forward, even a little bit. To obey the captain without question. To obey Captain Ishmael. The divergence point was either when he left District 19, when things went badly for him and the others there, or after the betrayal of Dong Rang in District 20, where he found his way to one of the port ships, or he was recruited on the mainland by Captain Ishmael. Yeah, both he and Ishmael have switched roles with Starbuck and Ahab respectively. He appeared more cheerful by Yi Sang standards, although it's clear that there are parallels between Yi Sang and Starbuck, where he slowly became a little more than the captain's yes man, much as the main Yi Sang became subservient to Encore, partly due to the blue pills he was made to take, although it was more due to all that mattered to him being destroyed when Dong Baek lit her fireworks to set the building on fire in order to escape from the T-Corp collector, and the League of Nine scattered. This variant of Yi Sang also instructed the uninitiated with how to wield harpoons, all to increase their survival chances. Yet this developed into a straw nihilism. It's unclear if this is what Starbuck did, but it was clear that he did submit to the will of the psychotic captain, although Yi Sang's attention to detail was still there, based on how he trained recently recruited sailors. Before we get to Ishmael's identities, let's talk about Dicey Association South Section 4 Yi Sang. Within a library operated by Dicey Association, a bespectacled Yi Sang was in one of his study sessions, something that's essential to replenish the knowledge that would be used as fuel for his augmented strength of his fists through his soul. He saw it as paramount and, well, in the mastery of the fist that he remained fully aware of the structure of the human anatomy. While he saw the methods of improving the body were numerous, which included sparring, basic cardiovascular fitness training, striking at punching bags, he needed to read up on that to, truly grasp what constitutes the mastery of the fist, asking if fatigue has been experienced to such a degree that each step feels as though you're wading through a quaggy mire. Yet even in that state, his mind was like the reflective surface of a freshly minted coin. He saw it as joyous on that occasion, to view the blueprint of the human body by himself, which is training for his brain like one would train the body, to fortify the threads of his mind like one would do with the threads of musculature. He compared the human anatomy to architecture. He found in Dicey Association's library knowledge repository countless bundles of paper. He found the subject of architecture most interesting. Yi Sang was lifted from a terrible fate by the Dicey Association, who at that point was around the architecture and human anatomy sections. Yes, when he looked through A row to H row, he saw the subjects having much in common. Structure, design, construction. he understood that, as he took notes with words that he couldn't vocalize. Each technique was an outcome of an extended mediation on the pursuit of utmost stability. Yet after a long contemplation, he understood that even the most robust of architectures have load-bearing walls that will crumble the entire construction if properly damaged. The study of such vulnerabilities was quite intriguing to him. As for why, it's because the study permitted one to demolish and reconstruct defective construction with a newly invented structure closer to perfection, to tear down the architecture with ease once its flaws have been identified and eliminated. This came to him upon reaching adulthood, as he began working for Dicey Association proper. Then he reached out to the H section of the library. He began to muse that perhaps flawed structures are ambling about in the name of human anatomy. He decided that he wished to correct those flaws, more due to his nature as a researcher than because Dicey Association required it. Seeing the human anatomy, something as appearing rather consistent across every individual. It transfigures into different structures as the body grows, seeing that certain structures growing to be increasingly unstable in their physical blueprints, yet are reinforced by the cement and steel frame of a powerful mind that allows them to stand steadfast. While certain other structures have firm physical balance, yet have built themselves an incredibly flawed internal design. The more flawed a structure was, the more obvious their vulnerabilities would become. With his research, he can demolish them with a mighty and precise strike, so that they might be rebuilt to a proper shape. This was the mastery of the fist, where, instead of the polymorphous fickleness of the keys that unsuccessfully achieve similar results but unnecessarily destroys the outer layer, it strikes at the core of the structure. It's why he, structure himself, selected fists as his passion. In simpler terms, he studies architecture and human anatomy because, much as knowledge of architecture can make someone a more efficient demolitionist, knowledge of human anatomy, as Sarah Connor would put it in Terminator 2 Judgment Day when speaking of a Terminator, it can make them more efficient killers. Yi-Sang does this not out of the bare minimum obligation of a dicey fixer, he does this for more personal reasons. This variant of Yi-Sang. The divergence point was likely early on, most likely when he left District 19, as he mentioned being found before adulthood, although he is still a researcher, so that's one thing that isn't so different to the main version. He also wielded a dagger as well, so that's also a similarity. As for the Dicey Association, clearly Carmen saw the library of the Dicey Association as competition. Either that or she saw them as too dangerous to be invited to the library, which might explain why they didn't have any part in the library incident. It would also appear that dicey fixers aren't restricted with what they study to replenish their knowledge. All that matters is that it's replenished when they go out to acquire knowledge and need to use lethal force to get it, as not all will be willing to hand it over. In fact, they see knowledge as power, and likely those that desire power. They do what they can to safeguard it. Makes you wonder if they need to review melee combat training regularly to make sure that they're any use in combat. Certainly those that favour fists over keys. Okay, here's a problem that I can see with the Dicey Association's strength augmentation method. Stalls that allow them to utilise their knowledge, where as long as they have knowledge to use, they can pummel their way through those, in a way, of their objectives quicker than your average shonen anime protagonist. But once that knowledge runs out, they're not much stronger than your average unaugmented human, and so they need to replenish their knowledge on a regular basis. So this isn't a good association to use for prolonged combat, and it might also explain why Carmen didn't want them. As if they were turned into books, they turned into books with alarming gaps in them. I mean, it'd be like a medical student finding a medical dictionary and it's missing the entire L section. Just as they needed to look up information on the liver for an alcoholic for whom the consequences of their drinking habit have finally caught up with them. I mean, what use would that be? Okay, next video, it's all Ishmael's identities. So far. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!